Hi guys, so I thought I'd do another ASMR video. Another one reading the book, but this is a different book. This one is by Nick Groffs, Chasing Spirits. Who used to obviously be in Ghost Adventures, and he's another inspiration of mine. So I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as the last one. The chapter I'll be reading from is called What's a Ghost and How Do We Find One? So let's begin. The more you investigate the paranormal, the more you start to get a feel for what works and what doesn't. Each location is different, so what works at Bobby Mackey's Music World may not work on Pavilion Island. One lesson Ghost Adventures has taught me is that this stuff is real, and it's a lot more prevalent than I'd previously thought. I've picked up a lot of ideas on how to investigate and how to get results from each location. Does it work every time? No. I've had plenty of misses, but I've also had a lot of success in gathering profound evidence of spirit contact. Going to so many haunted places has caused me to think about what might be out there and why our equipment helps us make contact. When I was a kid, I thought a ghost was some apparition that comes into our world to scare us. That's what ghost stories taught me, and it's the theme that Hollywood ran with. But now I realise an apparition is only one version of the ghost experience. It's also the most rare. Here's an experiment you can try right now. Think of a friend from your childhood. Go ahead, close your eyes and envision that friend. You can actually see that person. Your memory fired some electrochemical impulses in your brain that allowed you to visualise your friend. Energy made that happen. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. That's a law of physics, not a theory of physics or law. It's called the law of conservation of energy. It means if you take an isolated system such as a person, the energy contained in that person can't be destroyed. It can be formed from chemical energy like the signals that travel down your nerve pathways into kinetic energy, the energy required to move your arm, for example, but the energy is always there. This law makes sense to me. It means that when we die, our energy must go somewhere. The flesh and bones, the empty vessels, is left behind, but the energy thrives. Every time we remember someone who was passed on, we are using an electrical impulse in our brain to call up that person's image. That memory and image gives you a connection to that person. This is why so many people have visitation experiences involving their deceased loved ones. The ghost experience isn't just seeing an apparition. People can sense ghosts, like the way you can tell that when someone walks into the room behind you. Like the way you can tell when someone walks into the room behind you. People can smell ghosts. I can't tell you how many times witnesses have reported smelling perfume or a cigar when no source can be found. Smell is closely related to memory, so that scent may call up something specific in the case of a deceased loved one. People hear ghosts. Sometimes we hear disembodied voices in a location, and then of course there's actually seeing something. The ghost experience involves our senses. There's no way around it. So if spirits are energy, and if we need our senses to experience them, then we have a lot of equipment available that can be adapted to help us validate what we're experiencing in a haunted location. Questions fans ask. How can you tell the difference between a paranormal orb in a photo and something natural like dust or mist? Moisture. Orbs are a controversial topic in the paranormal. Most of the orbs you see in photographs are just halos around us with moisture. Sometimes what you're seeing is lens flare, light reflecting and reacting off the numerous lenses inside a camera. But there are those balls of light that glow, they produce light. Those are interesting and very rare. If the orb is produced into its own light, and even illuminating the area around it, it's not just dust or drops of moisture. It's been a learning curve. We're always experimenting with this stuff, but we've seen that our gear is clearly a factor in connecting us to what we experience out there. Let me start with the basics Ouija boards. There's no item in the paranormal discussion that's more controversial. The Ouija board is actually a brand name, a trademark that belongs to Hasbro. It's kind of like how people call a tissue a Kleenex or a photocopy a Xerox machine. The generic term is a talking response to my specific commands, and I know I'm communicating with something intelligent as opposed to a random event. Questions fans ask: do you think ghosts are really with us all the time, rather than fleeting presences? The more we learn about psychics, the more it sounds like this may be the case. That's definitely possible. One theory is that there are many different dimensions all around us, maybe even alternate universes. Quantum physics suggests that every choice that each individual makes creates an alternate universe where a different choice was made. I know it sounds mind-blowing, but there's a simple example. You walk down an alleyway, you get to the end and can turn left or right. If you decide to go left, then there's a whole other universe that exists. Then had you decided to turn right, billions of people making millions of choices each day, and you have an infinite number of dimensions. One theory is that these dimensions stack up next to each other like sheets of paper. Sometimes something like a cosmic quake erupts and 2 points of the sheet of paper touch. Each dimension sees the other for a brief period of time. Seeing a person from a different time period in the environment would definitely look like a ghost. My favourite method for spirit communication is still the audio recording. Like the Ouija board or EMF meter, this method is also clear to me. I'm asking the spirits to get close to the microphone and speaking as loud as they can. EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, isn't recorded as audio. It's imprinted directly onto the magnetic tape or circuit. The idea of EVP goes back at least a century to when ethnologist Waldemar Bogaris took his recording equipment to Siberia to record the spirit conjuring ritual of the Chukchi tribe. In the recording, you can hear a voice shriek out and overpower the audio equipment, though the voice of the shaman performing the ritual remains constant. EVP really took off in the late 1950s when a Swedish painter and musician named Fredrik Jorgensen took his audio recorder out into the woods to record the sounds of nature. On the playback he heard voices. From there, the equipment has evolved from reel-to-reel recorders to tape recorders, then to digital recorders and so on, but the idea has always been the same. You ask a question and get a response on the recorder, even though you haven't heard the voice with your ears. It's amazing when it happens. To those who are skeptical, I invite you to try it for yourself. EVP is the most powerful evidence we can offer. Though I've captured hundreds of EVP readings by now, each one still blows me away. When it comes to more complicated devices like the Ovilus PX or Spirit Box / Shack Hack, devices that quickly cycle through radio waves, allowing spirits to manipulate the sounds into words and sentences, I don't have all the answers on how these things work, I've included a section at the end of the book on paranormal investigation equipment. See page 239. I talk to the people who invented these things so you can hear about this technology. Behind these things straight away from the horse's mouth, but even the inventors stop short of telling you why it works. All I can say is it's worth experimenting because sometimes you'll get amazing results. For example, we were investigating a historic home called Rocky Point Manor in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. In season 5, this old home saw some serious shit during the Civil War. After the Battle of Perryville on October the 8th, 1862, Confederate forces retreated. Both Union and Confederate soldiers took over any building they encountered to convert into a field hospital. Anything you had in your house, from food to linens to furniture, was seized. The timing couldn't have been worse. It was October, so many families had stocked up on supplies for the winter, and now they had nothing. Likewise, Rocky Point Manor had become a field hospital. Many soldiers lost their limbs and some lost their lives. We found all kinds of artifacts in the dirt floor basement, from bones to belt buckles. During this investigation, I was out in the Perryville battlefield with my PX device, a kind of EMF meter with a built-in audio dictionary. PX takes readings of the electromagnetic field and runs it through software to determine the number. That number corresponds with a word in the dictionary. We believe spirits can use this device to communicate with us. For 2 hours we were out there. And this thing didn't speak up once. That in itself is rare. As usually, the PX did won't to go more than a few minutes before it says something, so we headed over to Rocky Point Manor and set up an experiment where we had cameras on a room with lines back to monitors at a base. We took turns going in. Aaron went in and the PX said nothing. I was next. Just as I was about to leave, I put my hand on the doorknob and the PX said, "Close," as in, close the door. Okay, fine. Could be a hell of coincidence. So now we all go quiet and I asked, "Why?" And then the PX says, "Nick." So now I'm thinking this isn't just a chance. I can't tell you how the spirits manipulated the circuits, but something happened to spit these 2 words out at the exact moment. But that wasn't the end of it. After I walked out into the hallway, it said, "Enemy." Considering this was a field hospital, that would have word had significance. At the same time it said the word enemy. I felt an electric charge run through my body. The equipment is great because it can validate your experience. The best judge, however, is you, the living person. When you feel that tingle, the hair stand on the back of your neck, you might be in the presence of something. So we have all this gear, but how do we make sure we're making the best use of it when we bring it to a haunted location? First, you have to know the history of a place before you go in. You need to know what took place there, who lived there, and how they died. When you know those things, you'll ask the right questions and get better results. It makes me crazy when investigators want to go into a location without doing their research first. That's just lazy. The history is the stage these ghosts stand on. Without the history, we're guessing, and that's not the way to do a paranormal investigation. By interviewing people from the location ahead of time, we already have a sense about what the most active parts of the building might be. That doesn't mean we'll ignore the other rooms, but it does mean we think twice about where to set up our static cameras. During the investigation, we want to be thorough. During setup, I'll often walk around with an EMF meter to see where the electromagnetic forces spike around the building. This doesn't mean ghosts necessarily, it could also mean there are electrical wires running through the wall. If I know where those high EMF areas are, I can rule out false positives when they occur. Though each place needs a different investigation plan in general, we want to walk through the entire location to see what we feel and what our equipment picks up. This is part of the investigation you rarely see on the show, because it's the least exciting part of the lockdown. When you do see parts of this process, it's because something has happened during the setup. Sometimes things start happening almost as soon as we enter a building. The Riddle House in West Palm Beach, Florida was one of those locations. We had just shut the door when we heard a banging noise. Some places seem like they're waiting for us. Earlier I said that there are advantages to investigating in a group because you have other people around to validate your finding. That's true. But if you've seen Ghost Adventures, you know there are plenty of times when we split up and go solo. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, it could be that the spirit entities are intimidated by the group and may be more likely to make contact with just one of us. The other reason is fear. When you're afraid, your senses are heightened and you're more often to whatever else might be in the environment. If you're alone and scared, you're sharper. Sometimes it's the only way to have a personal paranormal experience. It's amazing how much braver you get with even one other person there. I recall hosting an event at the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. We had filmed an episode of Ghost Adventures at this place in our second season. It turned out to be one of the most popular episodes. The place is insanely active all over. During events like this, we lead groups that can be as large as 25 to 30 people. I remember talking to one girl who said she wasn't scared at all. This place didn't frighten her, really. We were in a giant building, it was all dark, the paint was peeling, there were strange breezes and sounds all around us, and 6 stories of rusted cages used for the prisoners, but she was in a group. Okay, I told her. I moved her to the centre of the cell block and told her to start walking to the far wall. There was very little light, but just enough to see where you were walking. She was fine for a few steps, but soon it got darker and she couldn't hear or see us anymore. I heard her footsteps fading in the distance as she was walking alone past dark prison cells. Those old doors were wide open. Out of the corner of your eye, it looked like someone was all ready to jump out. A few seconds later I heard her yelp and the distant sound of her running footsteps coming our way. "Oh shit, I saw something," she said as she tried to catch her breath. The fear had made her more sensitive and open. It's a natural physiological response that dates back to our early human ancestors who had to pay close attention to their environment or else would be eaten by animals or attacked by enemies fighting for the limited resources of the land. Once we've completed the initial survey or sweep of the location, we head to the hotspots, those areas where witnesses have reported strange things happen. We might set up our static X-cams or do some experiments to see what happens. This is why knowing the history is critical. You will get better results by making specific remarks when asking pointed questions, as opposed to say hello anybody there. In many cases, we use provocation to stir things up, which is one of the most controversial aspects of what we do. We call out the entities that might be there. We charge the environment with our own energy. We invite physical contact. It's like preparing for a fight. We're showing we're not afraid. Go ahead, do something to me. We're ready to stand up to these things. No fear. Fear invites these entities inside of you and gives them room to get comfortable. By a show of force we're protecting ourselves, but no, it doesn't always work. Sometimes these things push back. Nor do we use provocation every time. If we're dealing with spirits who did no harm in life, then we might take a different approach, but I'm always pushing for spirit contact, whether it's by a show of force or by a trigger object. Trigger objects are really old school ghost hunting. You would put out an item that might have some meaning to the spirit there and see if they react. On Ghost Adventures we've used toys, shots of booze and many other effects to try to get a response. We're all drawn to objects in some way. People love their jewellery or their liquor, or a child might be comforted by a familiar toy, so it's natural that they'd want to reach out and interact with one of these objects from the other side. On a few investigations we've brought in psychics. In season 2 we used Chris Fleming for our live episode at Trans LNG Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. We also brought in psychics for the Riddle House in Florida and the Lizzie Borden House in Massachusetts. I believe we're all intuitive to some degree, but some of the gift more than others. For example, any one of us could play the piano, and I could show you the 3 keys you need to press at the same time to make a C chord. But that doesn't make me Mozart. When it comes to psychic, it's the same thing. Some folks truly have an intuitive gift, but I still listen to my gut. If I trust them, then I'm okay with using them in an investigation. To me, psychics are another tool in our arsenal to help verify what we're experiencing. We never know for sure what's waiting for us when we reach out. I tell this to everyone because it's so important. I don't care if you're using a Ouija board, a trigger object or some fancy piece of technology. We know the history before we go into a location to give us some kind of edge to know what we're dealing with. And we have all this equipment and these techniques for making contacts, but still that's only a start. You just never know. Could it be these things are now following us around? We know from experience that some entities know our names. We get them on our audio recorders and other devices. Could the entities at these locations have been told we were coming? It's all possible. That's why it's important to be focused and have a strong mind before you go in. It's also critical to leave behind when you leave. When you open a dialogue with whatever is on the other side, you might not like everything you hear. And sometimes if your gut tells you to run, you run. Fight or flight is a powerful human response to danger. I know we've been teased about making a run for it, but I won't apologise. When my body tells me to run, I'm going to run. Always keep your guard up, always. So that is what you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I do apologise about their sounds in the background and me having a drink.